The Ready, Set, Grow podcast is sponsored by Ag Expert, software designed for Canadian agriculture. Visit them today at agexpert.ca.
Welcome to the Ready, Set, Grow podcast, where we like to showcase startup and early stage companies, as well as visit with innovators in the agriculture and food industry. Today we're here with Joe Dales, Diana Laturnis, and special guest Chuck Baresich, General Manager at Haggerty Creek. Chuck, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I kind of live and farm in the area where I grew up in southwestern Ontario, and I have a farming background. My parents farmed, my grandparents farmed in this area, and we started this business about 20 years ago. My brother and we saw a need to service customers in the area. At that time, I was working with Farm Credit Canada, so I do have a finance and business background. I graduated from University of Guelph in 1996. Still the best school in the country as far as anyone's concerned. And we saw a need, and so we started our crop input and grain business back in 2001. And about 10 years ago, maybe 2004, 2005, that's when some of the precision ag business started to come into our business, where we were coming up with customers who were having some issues with repeatability and recording things and doing stuff again, and we're like, how can we help these customers? And when I left Farm Credit and I came to Haggerty, I was kind of new to this business. I came from it was very corporate at Haggerty Creek or at Farm Credit. And so, they had structures and systems in place and departments and all these kinds of things that looked after stuff. And so I came into my small business where I basically didn't have anything. And I was getting calls from my customers who were saying, we are applying fertilizer on a farm, and I don't think the product is going on correctly. And so I'd ask the farmer, I said, well, how many acres have you applied? And the farmer would say, I don't know. And then I said, well, how many pounds of product did you apply? And the farmer would say, well, I don't know. And I said, well, how can you possibly know that it's not going on correctly? Well, it just feels that way. And so I kind of made a point to myself back then to say, we need to do a better job of this. We can't just be, spreading fertilizer kind of willy-nilly and not knowing it. So we started to put precision tools on our application equipment. We were one of the first in the area to do that, where we would put very simple rate controllers on the spreaders and on the liquid fertilizer and anhydrous toolbars, so that the farmers could record and they could document what they were doing. And not only did that improve the products, how they were being applied, it did that for us. It eliminated a lot of the service work that we had trying to go out and diagnose the troubleshooting. But at the end of it, we actually ended up selling more product. It actually turned into, because the farmers knew what they were applying, they actually would apply more because they were very comfortable with it. So it was kind of a win-win all the way around in doing this. And so that has led into more precision tools and more documentation as becoming integrated into the business that we're doing, both into the fun on our farm, but also in the crop input business.
Yeah, Chuck, I really appreciate your openness and sharing and bringing innovation to farmers. I've had the pleasure of being down on your farm for several events and to see some of the technology in action. Tell us a little bit about the farm, and if you can go back, maybe it's 10 years. What kind of benefits have you seen by utilizing some of the precision ag technology and the tools? Because a lot of times people, they don't think they're generating the benefits from some of this information and some of these new technologies.
So when we started farming, just basically right after high school, everything was pen and paper, and everything was I guess, the old way, right? You know, my parents, I guess they stopped plowing back in the 80s, thank God. But, you know, everything, you know, we would disc everything, we would incorporate chemicals, and we would plant our corn, and then we'd combine it. And that's just what was always done. And the ground that we had is very light and sandy and very variable. And so we would get the same, not necessarily poor yields, but we would get very similar results to what my parents had always gotten. You know, the high sand knolls didn't perform very well. The low grounds, you know, we had issues with that. And in the fall, when it came time to figure out, you know, basically what we were trying to do, we didn't really know, because did we write it down right or whatever? And we started using some, you know, computer documentation. We started using the Ag Expert software back at the time. I think it was called Settler back at the time, to start to record, you know, what we're doing where, and start to record that stuff. We then started doing some grid sampling and mapping, and starting to use those tools. And one of the things that we discovered is that, you know, there's probably a better way that we can be doing this. And one of our neighbors, he used to no-till everything. So he didn't work any ground, he just no-tilled it all. And I don't want to say he kind of got made fun of by everyone else, because he was doing things differently. And back in 2001, he decided to retire, and we actually took over that farm. He was like a long time kind of family friend, and we were able to take over that farm. And when we took over the farm, we quickly realized that, you know, we were going to go from farming, you know, 300 acres to 1,300 acres. My brother and I were still working full time. We're like, there's no way that we can continue to do this the way we've always done it. And so we actually instead of making fun of this neighbor, we actually took a serious look at what he was doing. And we realized that this whole concept of no-tilling and changing our farming practice could enable us to do this. So we went through and we said, oh, let's actually look at this. We started no-tilling our crops. We started documenting what we were doing to save ourselves some time, becoming more efficient. And lo and behold, it actually worked out. We found out that we were getting the same yields or better yields than we were getting before. And not only that, some of the poorer spots for our farms are starting to improve. So that's, you know, so a light bulb kind of goes on to say, hey, you know, what else can we do? And that's when, you know, we start looking at, well, what are some of the problems and challenges that we're having? So by documenting and recording what we're doing, now we move into using a yield monitor to you know, actually prove out some of our challenges. Then we moved into using auto steer and RTK auto steer to control our traffic and to control how we plant, so that we can, you know, plant down the same sets of rows without tillage. These kinds of things, you know, we can start to document what the returns are to us. And, you know, as an example, some of our sand knolls that we used to get, you know, 80 to 90 bushel corn on those knolls. Now we're getting 140, 150 bushel corn on those knolls. Now, is it, you know, variety and genetics, or is it farming practices? Like, I'd like to believe that it's a little bit of both, you know, and that's a pretty significant return. And not only that, we can document it and we can show people, you know, what we're doing with precision tools.
Pretty impressive. So you've been keeping track of this for a number of years then, so you've got some pretty good data on that front. You know, what's your view on autonomous vehicles, and are you using anything in that line?
Well, I think on the autonomous side, when we got our first auto steer system back in 2004, I think it took about 15 minutes riding in that tractor with it steering itself for either. I don't want to take credit for it. I think it was my brother who said, "Why are we even in this cab?" You know, once we saw that and what it could do, it was kind of like, you know, why are we in this cab? How come this tractor needs us in here? Why can't it drive by itself? And, you know, so you have that going on in the back of your mind. The other thing that goes on in the back of your mind, like as we've gotten larger, you know, so we're farming, you know, over 3,000 acres now. So we've pretty much tripled the size of our farm since then. our grain elevator has grown substantially. Our families have grown. We have kids at home and all this kind of stuff. So as the farm grows, as your business grows, as your busyness in life generally grows, always go back to that consideration, saying, why am I in this cab? Why do I, is there a way that I can, balance out things out more? And that's where the autonomous stuff comes from. And I have been waiting with bated breath since 2004, saying, when do I not need to be in this cab? And so I've been following various, companies and things that have been looking at autonomous equipment for a long time. Whether it is a way to, we've obviously have done whatever we can do to this point. So we have put auto steers on all of our equipment. We have put automated injection systems on our sprayers. We don't have to mix chemicals. We've got automated rate controllers on our application equipment, so that we've automated as much of our stuff as we possibly can. So moving to an autonomous vehicle is the next step. We've also gone through and we've mapped all of our farms out. We've tried to get these pieces ready. And so back before 3 or 4 years ago, I've had sketches of what I thought an autonomous tractor would look like or could look like on the farm. And I went to the Precision Ag conference in London, and I saw the presentation from Seedmaster on the DOT unit, and I went, that's exactly what if you looked at my note, it was pretty much exactly what I had drawn out. It was bigger than what I had drawn out. I had drawn out something about half that size. But that design of a universal multi-application piece of equipment is what I had envisioned, and I saw that. So I kind of followed Seedmaster and their development. Follow them through their, they were purchased by Raven, which is a company that I'm very familiar with. And, kind of when I saw that happen, I had some confidence. And so I purchased a DOT unit last April and had it delivered to the farm in April. And we used it all last spring and through the summer for spreading fertilizer in an autonomous, it wasn't just, part of it was to be first. Like, it's always fun to be the first person, but a lot of it was to try to figure out, what can we make an autonomous vehicle work? Can we actually use it in our farming system? Is there, that was part of the thought process in having this vehicle. And until you actually have one, it's really hard to work on those things. A lot of it is theoretical. Now we moved on to this. So we made that agreement with DOT, and we've been using it. And at the same time, I've been, looking at, what other autonomous vehicles are going to work. Whether it's for, weeding and planting and stuff like that. And, I don't mind taking risks, but I'm also, a little bit cautious with my money. So we also made an agreement with a company called Haggerty to build a small autonomous robot for soil sampling. We looked at our, obviously from the farming business, we have different pieces that we thought we could automate, but we also looked at Haggerty from that business. What can we automate? And one of them is, our soil sampling process. We thought was a natural fit, and so we also commissioned a small robot. So Sagata had Haggerty. He had an idea for a robot which looked pretty good from a prototype perspective. We changed it probably 500% and got him to build us one, which we just got delivery of for doing soil sampling as well. So now we have two, that we're working on. And then the next project that we're working on is, autonomous weeding robots. And we have two coming for sure from the NAO company. The NAO Oz robots are coming this spring. And we're also working on two other systems that use a different technology for weeding, and we have our own reasons kind of for why we're looking down this neck of the woods, but I'm not sure if I want to get in, I'm not sure if you want me to get into that in the course of this podcast.
So I guess you've been working with sort of these three different companies. What is your vision, I guess, for sort of automation and robotics on the farm?
I think we have to accept the fact that ag robotics is going to be a disruptive technology. Some people think, when they think of automation, they picture the tractor that they have now, and they're going to put a kit on that tractor, and they're going to get out of the cab, and the tractor is going to go and plant, just like what they've always done. And that's fine. I don't have really any issues with that vision, but my vision is more disruptive than that. I'm kind of thinking, differently. That once we go to an autonomous system, we don't need the 500 horsepower tractors. We don't need the 80-foot cultivators. We're not going to need these things. Because once you start to see that autonomous vehicle working, I think there's a better way to do this. The other piece of the autonomous side is that, once we move into, smaller autonomous vehicles and these kinds of things, I don't want to use the word that they're throwaway. Like I don't want to think about them as like a cell phone or something like that. But the technology is going to change so much and so rapidly, and because it's so disruptive, having a person, commit to buy 15 robots for their farm, I don't know how realistic that's going to be. So, so part of my thought process on this is that farmers may want to rent these robots, or part of this comes into, what outcome are they actually going after? So this is where I'm getting into, from my interest level, is that we want to have farmers think about what outcome do they actually want to hire. So from Haggerty's perspective and from my perspective, I don't necessarily want them to come to me and say, hey, Chuck, I want to buy your robot. That's not really what I'm after. I'm saying the farmer comes to me and say, Chuck, I have this problem in my field. I have a problem with an invasive weed that we don't have chemical control for. Do you have a solution I can present to you? And my solution might be, I have these two machines that can come and take that weed out without a chemical. I have another, I've had a couple of farmers who come to me and say, Chuck, I have a vegetable crop for my market that has to be non-GMO. My customers are telling us that we want non-GMO, and this is what we have to do. We don't have the chemical control option for this product. It's high value to me. Do you have a solution? And this is where, as a robot company or as an autonomous provider, I can bring an autonomous solution to solve that outcome. And I kind of think this is where some of the disruption is going to come into the industry. This might not be a bunch of bricks and mortar and tractor companies selling robotics. It's going to be service providers providing the solution to the producers. That's kind of where I'm coming from with this.
So, Chuck, can you explain a little bit about how much human intervention there is with some of these ag robotics? Like, are they fully independent, or do you still need to be in the vicinity to operate them?
Well, I probably the biggest disappointment I've seen is that there's a lot more human intervention right now than what I'd hoped we'd be at. And there's a lot more press release versus actual out there. So you really have to separate the reality from the press release. As of right now, a person has to be with the robots at all times. And I think because this technology is fairly new, even from a safety perspective, I'm okay with that. I think the other side of it is that agriculture is very unique, and the way that we do things is very unique. One of the unfortunate things about farming is that you can have 4 farmers growing the same crop, every 100 acres apart, and every one of them will tell you that their way is the right way to do it. Even though at the end of the day, the differences are very minor between the two. So until we can, standardize some of those procedures, we're going to need some human intervention until that kind of stuff gets standardized and figured out. So for right now, like from the dot perspective, for example, a person still has to bring the dot to the field. a person still has to plan the mission that it's going to drive in the field. And until all of the safety features are 100% tested and secure, a person still has to watch that, watch the dot running. And the way that we've kind of overcome that in our business is we've said, well, what applications does this work for? So one of them is spreading limestone. So when you're spreading limestone, you need a person in the loader tractor, you need a person in the spreader. In this case, the person in the spreader can also be a person in the loader tractor can also be the person watching the dot unit. And so now we have, improved a process, simplified a process, because not only can the person who is in the loader, who is watching the dot, loading the lime and letting it go, not only can they, watch what it's doing, they can actually watch what kind of job it's doing spreading. They're not just running across the field at 12 miles an hour. They can actually see, is it spreading? Am I hitting the right places? Can I monitor this? So that's one way that you can kind of capitalize on the human intervention. From the weeding robot perspective, a way to look at this is that if you have a family or a group of people who are going to be looking after a vegetable crop, if that robot can eliminate even 80% of the weeds, 90% of the weeds, well, that greatly reduces not only the labor requirement, but just improves your quality of life, for that crop. So what that does, so even though you still need some human intervention going through there, following behind the robot, catching the 2 or 3 weeds that it misses, you're still freeing up a tremendous amount of time to be doing other things. And what the hope is for some of these producers is that they can take that time and produce different crops, enhance some of the higher value crops or whatever, because the robot has helped them. And and we have to be realistic too, that when you have a farm, you can never eliminate the farmer, right? You're never going to eliminate those brains and that thought process. So the robot almost becomes like that third hand or something like that. Is probably a better way to look at that.
Yeah, Chuck, I agree with you. I think what people don't realize is the adoption of technology. There's always progressions. So if you recall 20 years ago, your first smartphone to where you are now with an Apple 12, it's totally different. And I think the trends are unmistakable with sensors and vision systems, hardware, software, and agriculture being such a large part of the economy, and the efficiencies. I think it's Rob Sake, who was with DOT, said, we're going to lose the dirty, dangerous, and dull jobs on the farm. So it just absolutely makes sense to me, and that when we look out 5 and 10 years, robotics and automation are going to be a big part of the farm. And I congratulate you for being first with DOT and being first with Raven and supporting Sagata and Karachi, because somebody needs to step up, and we're trying to do the same thing at RH Accelerator. We've been networking in with people like Sengen, and they're involved in their robotic smart greenhouse project and some of those. So I think I'm excited about it going forward. It's not just going to be a linear easy adoption, because you're right. The technology is not quite there. It's going to require a lot of education, but the trend is totally unmistakable in my mind, and it'll bubble up from small places like Regina, Saskatchewan, where Norbert Bugeaud invented and funded DOT on the first part of the journey. So I'm excited.
Yeah. And what's interesting too is that it's bringing people who you wouldn't normally picture in the agriculture business into that agriculture business. And I'm going to pick on Sagata a little bit, just because I know him fairly well now. like what he's told me, like he comes from a 1 acre rice farm. Like that's what his family farms in India, and so to think about the challenges that agriculture faces in the world, and how do we improve this in general. Like we tend to look at our own backyard and think that this is the only way things that should be. But the Sagada has been given a chance to be involved in agriculture in a way that I don't think he told me himself he didn't think he would be. And I've had people that has worked for him. I've had people contacting me kind of across Ontario, across actually from other parts of the world, who are very interested in autonomy and bringing this forward. And I find that quite exciting. On how this is progressing and moving forward, and who's getting involved, and some of the backgrounds, the people that you meet is really, really cool. Especially my background is we are very kind of isolated out here in Bothwell. There's not too much changes, and so it's fun to expand that.
Yeah. Thanks, Chuck, for sharing all that information. Before we head out, is there anything else you'd like our viewers to know about?
I don't. I think going forward, I'm hoping that we're going to try to formalize some of the trials that we're doing and some of the practices. We are, we use the DOT on somewhat of a limited scale. I think the thought process is to actually turn this into a standard practice is what we're going to try to do, and try to communicate how that's being done. I think that's where what the thought process is going forward. And then as the new tools come forward, we're going to try to take what we learn with the DOT and try to apply that to the other systems.
That's awesome. I guess if our listeners have any questions or want to reach out to you, is there a way they can connect with you?
They can contact me at Haggerty. They can look me up on our website, haggertycreek.com. It's probably the safest way to get a hold of us. And I'm also on Twitter at the Sand Farmer, and on LinkedIn as well.
Okay, perfect. And I just wanted to thank our listeners for tuning into the Ready, Set, Grow podcast. If you want to see past and future episodes, check us out at rhaccelerator.com or find us on your favorite podcasting app. And I just wanted to thank you again, Chuck, for joining us. It was really great to see what's going on in automation and robotics in agriculture.
Great. I appreciate that. It's fun to join in.